Sometimes we need context to, first off, understand a point that someone's trying to make. It's hard to get that in 2021. I think that generally we take the shortcuts when it comes to looking at a point that somebody makes and reacting to it. We'll very often pull a specific clip that we take issue with as opposed to letting somebody speak out over a course of 10 minutes. This isn't just something that happens in sports, it happens in politics. It's one of the reasons that I look at, the way that we hold debates these days, and I'm like, does that make sense? Two guys speak for 60 seconds, they talk over each other. Why not just have them both in a room for like 3 hours and they just have a long podcast-esque conversation? But I guess that's not good for television, and that's sort of the way that many things in media have been modeled these days to be good for television. Anywho, I also think sometimes you need to hear something that is actually bad to keep in mind what is and what isn't in 2021, especially when it comes to casual racism, cultural insensitivity, xenophobia, etc. So we're going to talk about what Stephen A. Smith had to say about Shohei Ohtani in a moment. But for a little context, I want to play some of the comments that Kevin Mather made at the Bellevue Rotary Club breakfast, the infamous Bellevue Rotary Club breakfast, not to be confused with the other Bellevue Rotary Club breakfasts. And think about what he had to say about now Seattle Mariner All-Star, who's not going to pitch in tonight's game, Yusei Kikuchi, and one of the things that he found so frustrating about Yusei Kikuchi.
It frustrates me. For instance, we just rehired Iwakuma. Iwakuma was a pitcher for us for a number of years. Wonderful human being. His English is terrible. He wanted to get back into the game. He wanted to, and he came to us, and we quite frankly want him as our Asian scout interpreter. What's going on in the Japanese league? He's coming to spring training, and I made the same. I'm tired of paying his interpreter. Because when he was a player, we pay Iwakuma X, but we also had to pay $75,000 a year to have an interpreter with him. His English suddenly got better. His English got better when we told him that.
The casual way with which he brags there about how they threatened, I guess, to pull salary, and all of a sudden his English got better, and also just the way that he starts it up. Oh, his English was terrible. I hate hearing that. And I think that when it comes down to it, you have to realize how difficult it is for baseball players, many of whom, not all of whom, but many of whom are coming from socioeconomic backgrounds that probably don't lend itself to having the best education possible. And I would specifically point to those who come from Latin America, where you have to pick up a language on the fly when you get picked up by some of these teams. And it is not easy. That's why I give Julio Rodriguez so much credit for the presence and the command of the English language that he has at such a young age. But you hear that comment from Kevin Mather, who's like, oh, this guy's English was terrible. I can't believe we had to pay for an interpreter. Which is just kind of a messed up way to talk about your own employee, and the casual indifference with which he said it, and the braggadocious way that he talked about threatening a pay cut. Oh, then he started speaking English there. That's awful. That sounds like somebody who is viewing somebody else as not necessarily a human being who works for him, but somebody who is just a dollar figure. Not good. Kevin Mather also talked out of his you-know-what when talking about Julio Rodriguez in that Bellevue Rotary Club breakfast.
Julio Rodriguez has got a personality bigger than all of you combined. He is loud. His English is not tremendous, but him and Kelenic are very good friends. He's a year behind Kelenic. He will probably be here everybody says 2021. He won't be here till 2022 or 2023.
That is closer to what Stephen A. Smith had to say about Shohei Ohtani. That is closer. His English is not tremendous. That's factually wrong. Julio Rodriguez, that guy's got a really good grasp of the English language. For such a young guy, he knows exactly, I think, the proper way to inflex and I think just speak in a way that it's not just that he understands the language. He understands. It's hard to describe. You know, certain people are good at, I think, adding a little bit of emotion and intonations into speaking, and other people aren't. And I think he's, considering he is learning this language on the fly, has done a really good job with that. I mean, we spoke to him early in 2020. I can only imagine how much better he has gotten as he continues to immerse himself in the United States, as he continues to play minor league baseball. So I wanted to play those Kevin Mather comments before we talk about what Stephen A. Smith had to say about Shohei Ohtani. He had a bad take, Stephen A. Smith. It was a bad take that was based off of something that was completely wrong. He should be criticized for those things. He should be shamed for those things. He should be dragged. He apologized this morning. He apologized on Twitter last night. He tried to explain his way out of it on Twitter last night. I don't think, though, that the guy needs to be fired. I don't think that he needs to be suspended. I don't think that he needs to be canceled, as we do these days so often on the internet. In case you didn't hear what he had to say about Shohei Ohtani, he was asked this question. Is it good for baseball that Shohei Ohtani's baseball's top attraction? He said no. Let's pause for a moment. He is asked if this sport, essentially, with Shohei Ohtani as its headline attraction, with that question, if Shohei Ohtani's, I guess, going to be able to make this sport more popular. His answer is no. I actually disagree with that. I think Ohtani has been great for baseball. The problem is, baseball conversation is something that you see very rarely on the national television shows, specifically First Take. And you can tell as this interview goes on, as this segment goes on, that Stephen A's talking a little bit out of his derriere. Here is where Stephen A. Smith started digging himself a hole.
When I look at Ohtani, he is big time. Babe Ruth, 33 home runs, batting .279, got a 4-on-1 record with a .379 ERA as a pitcher. This brother is special. Make no mistake about it. But the fact that you got a foreign player that doesn't speak English, that needs an interpreter, believe it or not, I think contributes to harming the game to some degree when that's your box office appeal. It needs to be somebody like Bryce Harper, Mike Trout, those guys. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, that's not the case.
It does not need to be someone like Mike Trout. Mike Trout is decidedly boring. He's a boring player. Bryce Harper is not. Bryce Harper, on that point, Stephen A., I think is correct. Saying that Shohei Ohtani is harming the game, that is hyperbole in addition to being wrong. The thing that people are focusing on, though, here is that because Stephen A. Smith says that Shohei Ohtani needs an interpreter, it's as if he needs to be able to speak English in the United States or leave. I think that's the impression some people are getting. I get it. We are all a little bit more, I think, sensitive to anything that is said with any racial overtones these days. And you know what? I can't put myself in the shoes of any Asian American, any Asian who is listening to this show right now and how you feel. I can't. I'm just trying to look at it from the objective way that I can in this spot. And at the very least, Stephen A. Smith here is just factually wrong. We'll get to that in a moment, though, because he did not stop digging during this segment on First Take yesterday.
I don't think it helps that the number one face is a dude that needs an interpreter so you can understand what the hell he's saying in this country. And that's what I'm trying to say.
So he doubled down there. Here's the problem. Shohei Ohtani does speak English, and much like with Julio Rodriguez, it seems like he's got a pretty good grasp of it. Here he is, a brief selection from his acceptance of the American League Rookie of the Year award.
Thank you. First off, I want to say what an honor it is to share this stage with so many great players. Congratulations to you all.
Stephen A. thinks he needs an interpreter all the time. He didn't need it there. Maybe he does need it on a more regular basis than the average baseball player, but he's factually wrong with the argument that he begins with. And he should be destroyed for that. He should be shamed for that. That said, I get where he was trying to go here. And the larger point was that maybe this sport, baseball specifically, needs a different kind of savior, race of savior. Doesn't sound good, does it? But as far as the actual future of baseball, I do think you have to be honest with yourself and ask, hey, like, what is going to be best to get everybody back in? Because clearly Shohei Ohtani is not pulling everybody back in, even though he should. He's awesome. He's the only reason I watched the home run derby last night. I love this guy. I really do. That swing is ridiculous. It's beautiful. And the guy pitches on top of that. Is he a great pitcher? I don't know, but he's a pretty good pitcher. And who does that these days? Who does both things? We haven't seen that since Babe Ruth, somebody who is that good of a hitter that can also do things on the other side of things. So this is not Stephen A. diminishing Shohei Ohtani because he can't speak English. He's not doing that. He is just talking about whether or not, and again, it sounds like I'm defending him. The take is bad. It's a bad take, and it's based off of bad information that Stephen A. Smith was too lazy to dig into and get. But when I see this argument made, I don't see him saying you have to speak American or get the heck out. You know, I don't see him saying that here. I don't hear him saying that. And he's been trying to theorize over the last couple of weeks why Ohtani's not a bigger deal in the national sports scene given what he's been doing, which has been obviously incredible.
It's played in the United States and Canada. That's where Major League Baseball is being played. So when I'm looking at it from this perspective. In the United States of America, when you talk about the sport of Major League Baseball, you talk about its lack of diversity in terms of African American players. You talk about the influx of foreign players. If you are a star and you need an interpreter, that might have something to do, not everything, because there's a lot of things that go into it, but that might have something to do with your inability to ingratiate yourself with that young demographic to attract them to the sport.
I don't think he's necessarily wrong there entirely, right? Like, there are some points along the way where you can disagree and say, actually, I just like watching sports. I don't care what anyone says. And I do think that in today's era of TikTok, all the home runs that Shohei Ohtani hits, people see those hits and they say to themselves, yeah, this guy's awesome. And we, of course, saw firsthand here. It doesn't matter what Marshawn Lynch says. It doesn't matter what Ichiro Suzuki says. So I understand what he's trying to make as an argument. The language barrier has to be somewhat of an obstacle in terms of Shohei Ohtani becoming the biggest possible United States sports icon that he can be. Or in terms of putting a league with waning popularity back on the map. Like, somewhat of an obstacle. But I would say that that obstacle might be for, I don't know, people who probably aren't that into baseball to begin with. That are just going to look for reasons that they don't want to maybe dive in. Oh, well, he's not American or something like that. And I don't think there's a lot of people that think that way. I don't. I think there are some, but I don't think everyone does. And I just want to say, well, the issue I took with yesterday, with Stephen A. Smith's take, which was a bad take, was the people that were isolating that clip and saying Stephen A. Smith saying Shohei Ohtani shouldn't be considered a face of baseball because he needs an interpreter. That's not what he said there. That was a tweet that got like 10,000 likes, and the clip attached to it, you think that, okay, well, this guy watched the entire video. He had the full context of the video with the way that he described it. And he didn't. Stephen A. Smith was wrong here. His take was entirely based off of something that was also incorrect, that Shohei Ohtani needs an interpreter to speak English. So I think you shame him. Like we shame all bad takes on the internet. Or shame bad takes that I've made on this very show. To fire him or cancel him, nah. And someone texted in really quickly before we get to the end. Oh, well, Paul, I mean, Stephen A. Smith's a black man, and he says this, and he shouldn't get fired. But Kevin Mather, he should get fired for this. Kevin Mather could not stop, like, basically insulting the entire Mariners team, and at the same time gave Baseball's Players Association every single bit of ammunition that it needed, so that there will possibly be a work stoppage next season. Like, Kevin Mather was not just fired for those comments, but those comments, I think, were worse than the ones that Stephen A. Smith made. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Context matters here, both in terms of the overall discussion Stephen A. was trying to make, which, again, I disagree with and I think was factually wrong and was a bad take, and on top of that, with what Mather said and the way that he said it.